I've explored caves all over Appalachia, but something about this one doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't have a name, just a set of GPS coordinates passed around in online caving forums. A deep, narrow limestone cavern out in the middle of nowhere, hidden in the thick forests of West Virginia, supposedly untouched. No official maps, no marked entrances. Exactly the kind of place I live for. I've been a recreational cave diver for over a decade. I know the risks. Flooded tunnels, unstable rock formations, the kind of pitch-black darkness that swallows even the strongest flashlight. But I've always been careful, rational. I don't spook easily. That changed the moment I stepped inside this cave. I found the entrance after a 2-hour hike through dense underbrush. A narrow, jagged crack in the earth, barely wide enough to squeeze through. I rappelled in, my headlamp cutting through the dust as my boots hit the cave floor. The air felt wrong. Not stale, not damp like most caves. Just off. I chalked it up to my own nerves and pressed on. The first 100 meters were uneventful. Tight crawl spaces, slick limestone walls, the occasional colony of bats rustling in the dark. But as I descended deeper, the silence became oppressive. Then I heard it. A faint whoosh of air, like something exhaling from deep within the cave. I turned, scanning the tunnel behind me. Nothing, just empty rock and darkness. Air currents aren't unusual underground. Temperature shifts can cause pockets of wind, but this felt deliberate, like something was breathing. I shook it off and kept moving. An hour in, I reached a chamber that set my teeth on edge. The walls were smooth, unnaturally so, as if something had worn them down over centuries. A tunnel branched off to the left, plunging into absolute blackness. That's when I heard the first rock slide. A soft, dragging sound. Stone scraping against stone. I swung my light around. No movement, no falling rocks. Just silence. I stayed still for a long time. The sound had been close, too close, but there was nothing there. After a few minutes, I forced myself to move. I was just jumpy, that's all. Caves make weird noises all the time. Shifting earth, settling rock. It's normal. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something that wasn't normal. My footprints. I had left a clear trail in the thin layer of dust covering the cavern floor. But now, right next to them, was a second set of tracks. They weren't mine. I stared at the footprints, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. They were faint, just impressions in the dust, partially smudged, but they were there. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were old. Maybe another caver had been here before me, though that seemed unlikely. I had to rappel down to get in, and there were no signs of climbing equipment, no old rope burns on the rock. And yet, these tracks weren't covered in dust like they should have been. They were fresh. I knelt down, running my glove over them. Too big to be mine. Longer, wider, and the shape. Something was off about it. 5 toes, but the proportions weren't right. The arch of the foot was too high, the heel too narrow. The prints almost looked stretched, distorted. I swallowed hard, scanning the chamber with my headlamp. The tunnel stretched out into pure blackness ahead, silent as death. I was alone. Right? I forced myself to keep moving. The deeper I went, the stranger things got. My radio, which had been working fine when I checked in earlier, started cutting out. Just static, no matter how many times I tried to adjust it. Then there was the wind. I felt it again. Short bursts of air, brushing against my skin like something was breathing nearby. It was coming from deeper inside the cave, which made no sense. I checked my topo map. There shouldn't be any large chambers ahead. No space is big enough to create an air current like that. The only thing that could cause a draft that strong was a larger exit somewhere. But this cave was a dead end. I told myself it was just temperature shifts, pressure changes. I'd read about stuff like that before. Then, the rock started moving again. Not a cave-in, not a landslide, just small, deliberate shifts. I heard them behind me, to my left, then ahead, tiny scraping sounds, like pebbles being nudged across stone. I stopped walking. The noise stopped too. I turned slowly, scanning my surroundings. My headlamp cut through the darkness, but the light seemed thinner somehow, like it wasn't reaching as far as it should. My chest tightened. The tunnel behind me looked different. I wasn't lost. I knew exactly where I'd come from, but something about the rock walls seemed off. The shadows stretched in ways they shouldn't. The tunnel seemed narrower than before, like the cave itself was closing in. I'd had enough. I took a deep breath and started back toward the entrance, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. It was fine, just paranoia. I'd retrace my steps, get back to the surface and shake it off. Then I heard it. A whisper. Not words, not a voice, just a sound. Low, breathy, almost like the wind, but it was close, right behind me. I spun around, shining my light into the darkness. For half a second, I thought I saw something move. A flicker of something, shifting in the blackness just beyond my headlamp's reach. It was low to the ground, long, coiled. Then it was gone. My brain scrambled for an explanation. A trick of the light? A shadow? My own panic messing with my head? I backed away, pulse hammering in my ears. I needed to go. Now. I turned and bolted. I moved fast, faster than I should have in terrain like this. My breathing was too loud, my boots slipping against loose rock, but I didn't care. I needed to get out. I scrambled up the passage, heart slamming against my ribs. Every part of my brain was screaming that I was being chased, but when I glanced behind me, there was nothing, just empty rock and shadow. It wasn't until I saw the rope hanging down from the entrance that I finally let myself breathe. I clipped in, hands shaking, and hauled myself up, lungs burning. I didn't stop until I was back on the surface, stumbling onto solid ground, gulping down fresh air. The forest was still. No wind, no sounds, just the quiet rustle of leaves. I turned back toward the cave entrance. Nothing followed me out. No movement, no sound. But as I stood there, my stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. I could still feel it. Something was watching me. I told myself I wasn't going back. I spent the next few days trying to forget what had happened. I scrolled through my cave diving forums, telling myself I must have imagined the footprints, the whispers, the shifting shadows. I knew caves could mess with your head. I'd heard stories, people getting lost, convinced the walls were moving, sound carrying in weird ways, making you think something was nearby when it wasn't. That's what I told myself. And yet, 3 nights later, I found myself standing at the cave entrance again. I had to go back. I needed to prove that nothing was down there, that it was all in my head. I brought extra gear this time. Better radio, a backup headlamp, even a GoPro strapped to my helmet. If anything weird happened, I'd have proof. Or, more likely, I'd have proof that I was being an idiot. That was the plan anyway. I rappelled down, my stomach tight. The moment my boots hit the cave floor, I felt it. That same wrongness in the air. I switched on my camera. "All right," I muttered, mostly to hear my own voice. "Day 3. Everything looks normal." My words echoed back at me, flat and lifeless. I started forward, retracing my steps from before. The footprints were gone, probably erased when I ran out last time, but I knew exactly where I had seen them. I stopped at the spot, shining my light over the rock. My own fresh prints stood out in the dust, and then, right in front of me, another footprint. It hadn't been there when I entered, and it wasn't mine. I stared at it, pulse hammering. It looked the same as before, too long, too narrow, except this time it was deeper, like something had stepped down hard. I swallowed and turned my GoPro toward it. Okay, that's weird. My voice came out thin and shaky. A noise scraped somewhere deeper in the tunnel. I jerked my head up, shining my light into the darkness. My hands were slick with sweat against the flashlight. Nothing. I took a breath. All right. Maybe. The light went out. Panic slammed through me. I smacked the flashlight against my palm. Nothing. I scrambled for my backup, clicked it on. A weak, flickering beam barely cut through the dark. My radio crackled. I froze. At first, it was just static. Then, beneath the white noise, breathing. Slow. Deep. Too close. I turned the GoPro toward the tunnel ahead. The beam of my light wavered. The passage looked wrong, like the rock itself had shifted when I wasn't looking. The walls felt tighter, the angles sharper, the shadows stretched too far. Then, just at the edge of my vision, a shape moved, low to the ground, long, too fast. I stumbled back, my own breath coming in ragged gasps. Hello? Silence. My light flickered. Then, the rock started moving again. This time, I knew I wasn't imagining it. Tiny pebbles skittered across the ground, rolling in slow, deliberate patterns. Larger stones shifted, one after another, like something was testing them, like something was circling me. The air felt thick. My head was pounding. Then, from the tunnel ahead, a whisper, low and breathy, curling through the dark. I turned and ran. I didn't care about safety. I didn't care about keeping my footing. I just sprinted. The cave felt different, like the tunnels had stretched, twisted into something deeper than before. My own footprints barely lined up with my previous path. The whispering didn't stop. It followed me, curling around the edges of my hearing. Not words, not human, just something exhaling in long, drawn-out breaths. I skidded to a stop. My rope wasn't there. My chest was tight, my legs shaking. I shone my light up. Nothing. Just smooth, empty rock. But that wasn't possible. I rappelled down from here. The rope had been right there. I swallowed a scream, forcing myself to think. My radio. Maybe I could call for help. The static crackled. A noise bled through the speaker. Not a voice. Not breathing. Something else. A deep, guttural rumble. Like a growl. But not from an animal. Something bigger. Something old. The air felt heavier, like the weight of the entire cave was pressing down on me. Then, movement. Not from the tunnel, from above. Something was there, in the dark, watching. I turned my light up, and my flashlight died. I don't remember climbing out. In 1 second, my flashlight died, and I felt something in the dark above me. The next, I was now outside, collapsed on the forest floor, gasping for air like I'd been drowning. My rope was back. It was right there, hanging from the entrance like nothing had happened. I stared at it, my whole body trembling. My gloves were torn, my knees scraped raw, Had I climbed out in a blind panic? Had I blacked out? I didn't know. All I knew was that I wasn't going back. Not ever. At least, that's what I told myself. For days, I tried to move on, but something about that cave wouldn't let me go. The whispering, the footprints, the way the tunnels seemed to shift when I wasn't looking, and the thing in the dark, above me. I hadn't seen it. Not really. But I had felt it. It had been close, watching, waiting, and then there was my camera. I had taken my GoPro down with me. If there was any proof, any at all, it would be on that footage. I sat in my apartment, staring at the memory card. I wasn't sure I wanted to see what was on it, but I had to. My laptop whirred as I plugged it in. The screen blinked and the video started playing. At first, it was normal. Me climbing in, narrating my way through the tunnels. My own voice sounded too calm, like I had no idea what was waiting for me. Then I reached the footprints. I heard myself hesitate, my breathing change. I could hear the static in the radio, the wind that wasn't really wind. Then, the whispering. I felt my skin prickle just hearing it again. It didn't sound human. It didn't sound alive. But the worst part? The thing I didn't notice at the time? At the very edge of the frame, something moved. It was just for a second. A shift in the shadows, like something long was sliding out of sight. I paused the video, rewound, played it again. There. Something disappearing around a rock wall. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I went frame by frame, trying to make out what I had caught on camera. The shape was wrong. It was low to the ground but long. Almost like a snake, but thicker, too thick, and just before it vanished, I swore I saw an eye. A single, massive eye, reflecting my headlamp for a fraction of a second, watching me. I slammed the laptop shut. I couldn't breathe. I should have stopped right there. I should have left it alone. But the more I thought about it, the worse it got. The cave had been wrong, yes, but what if it wasn't just a cave? I started digging. Old maps, local legends, stories from other cavers. And that's when I found it. A name, a story, a warning. The Grootslang, an ancient creature, older than mankind, something that was never supposed to exist. The stories came from South Africa, but myths had a way of spreading. A massive serpentine beast, black as night, eyes like polished gems, an intelligence that went beyond simple hunger. It lived in deep, dark places, places untouched by light, and sometimes it watched. I stared at the old texts, my hands shaking. I thought of the tunnels, the wind that wasn't wind, the whispering, the thing I had almost seen. I thought of my rope, how it had vanished, and then how it had come back, like something had been playing with me, like something had let me leave. My stomach twisted. I didn't escape. I had been allowed to go. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, what if it wasn't finished with me yet? I should have left it alone. I should have deleted the footage, shut my laptop, and buried the memory of that cave deep in my mind. But I couldn't. The Grootslang, if that's what it was, had let me leave. That meant it was intelligent. It chose to let me go. But why? Why me? And more importantly, what would happen if I went back? I spent a week spiraling. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the whispering, the shifting rocks, the breathing, and worse, I felt watched. even outside, even in my apartment. Nothing obvious, just that prickling sensation at the back of my neck. That feeling you get when someone is standing behind you. Except no one ever was. I lasted 7 days before I caved. Before I found myself back in the forest, standing at the entrance. The rope was still there, swaying slightly in the wind. The hole gaped beneath me, leading down into that black, hungry dark. I hesitated. Something in my gut screamed at me to turn around. But the thing is, it wasn't fear anymore. It was curiosity. What if I had come so close to discovering something impossible? Something ancient. Something that no human had ever survived long enough to understand. I rappelled down. The moment my boots hit the cave floor, I felt it, like the cave was waiting for me. The air was thick, still. No wind this time. No whispering. Just a deep, suffocating silence. I moved carefully, following my old path. My footprints from last time were still there, leading forward. Just ahead, a new footprint. It hadn't been there when I left. And this time, it was deeper. Something heavy had stepped down, recently, and it was leading me deeper inside. I should have turned back. Instead, I followed. The tunnels seemed different this time. The walls were smoother. The passages felt longer, even though I knew I was retracing my steps exactly. And then, up ahead, a glow. I froze. The tunnel ahead wasn't pitch black anymore. A faint, sickly light pulsed from deeper inside. Not bright, just enough to cast long, shifting shadows along the rock walls. It shouldn't have been possible. There was no bioluminescent life in caves like this. No natural light sources. And yet, there it was, pulsing, like breathing. I crept forward, heart hammering. The tunnel widened into a massive chamber, the largest I had seen so far. And there, along the far wall, was the source of the glow. Gems. Hundreds of them, embedded in the rock. Massive gleaming stones that caught the light from my headlamp and refracted it into strange, shimmering patterns. I took a shaky step closer. The glow wasn't coming from the gems themselves, I realized. It was reflecting off them, from something else. The cave breathed. I heard it, felt it, a deep rumbling exhale, rolling through the cavern like distant thunder. The air shifted. Something moved. My flashlight flickered. I turned my head slowly, and there, just beyond the gems, a shape. It was impossible to describe. Massive, coiled, a shape that seemed to blend with the stone itself, like it had been waiting, motionless, for centuries. And the worst part? The gems weren't gems. They were eyes. Hundreds of them, embedded in the rock. And now, one by one, they were blinking. I couldn't breathe. The shape uncoiled, moving slowly, deliberately. A sound rumbled through the cave, deep, resonant, almost like laughter. It had been waiting. For me. I felt something shift beneath my feet. The rock itself moved. The walls closed in. I was never supposed to leave. It had only let me go because it knew I would come back. The whispering started again, but this time it wasn't behind me. It was inside my head. Words, foreign, ancient, but somehow I understood. You see me now. Now you understand. You were never alone down here. I turned and ran. I don't remember climbing out. Just like last time, my memory cut out. One second I was inside, the next I was outside, gasping, trembling. My rope was gone, but I was alive. For now. I'm not okay. I haven't been okay since I came back. I tell myself I made it out, that I survived, but some part of me isn't convinced, because the thing in that cave, it let me go. And I don't know why. I don't remember the climb. Just like before, my memory cuts off inside the cave and picks up again outside. But this time, when I opened my eyes, the entrance was gone. Not covered up, not hidden, just gone, like it had never existed. I spent hours looking for it, circling the area like a madman, but the crack in the earth, the narrow hole I had dropped through, it was nowhere to be found. Like the cave had closed itself, like it had swallowed me up and spit me back out somewhere else. But that doesn't make sense, does it? Because lately I've started to wonder, what if the cave never disappeared? What if I just forgot where to find it? I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I dream about the cave, about the tunnels stretching on forever, about the thing moving in the dark, unseen, untouched. Sometimes I wake up gasping for air, convinced I'm still down there. Sometimes I hear breathing that isn't mine, but the worst part? I miss it. I didn't realize it at first. At first, I told myself I was just curious, that I just wanted answers. I started going on longer hikes, telling myself I was just clearing my head. But every time, I ended up near the same place, standing where the cave entrance used to be, running my hands over the earth, searching, digging, because I can feel it. It's still there. I just have to find it again. I finally understand. It didn't let me go. It made me leave, so I would want to come back. And now I can't think about anything else. Not my job, not my life, not my friends. Only the cave. I know how this ends. Tonight I will travel to the cave. I'm going to find it again. And when I do, I won't be coming back.